April 6, 2017, 22-year-old Jacob Gray went missing while traveling on Salt Duck Hot Springs Road in the Olympic National Park of Washington. His whereabouts remained unknown until August 10, 2018, when his body was discovered in Ho Lake, located within the Daniel J. Evans Wilderness area of the park. This was 15 miles away from his belongings and at an elevation of 5,300 feet. This is the story of Jacob Gray. Jacob Gray, a native of Santa Cruz, California, embarked on a solo bicycle trip from Port Townsend, Washington on April 5, 2017, hauling a fully loaded trailer of camping equipment. His ultimate destination was the Daniel J. Evans Wilderness in Olympic National Park, Washington, before continuing eastward. However, on April 6, Gray's bicycle, trailer, and most of his belongings were found approximately 6.5 miles up Salt Duck Hot Springs Road, a picturesque route named after the Quileute Indian term for sparkling waters. An unusual discovery was made. A bow was lying on the ground, and arrows were embedded in the ground and protruding from the back of the trailer, but there was no sign of the owner of the bike and gear. Jacob Gray's bicycle had a unique backstory. It was a promotional bike won by his father, Randy, at a contractor's show. As the son of a house builder, Gray was skilled with a skill saw, and he constructed a plywood rack behind the seat, which he secured 2 milk crates to, side by side. The bike's flat rat trap pedals were suitable for his running shoes or hiking boots, and while it wasn't built for speed or aesthetics, it was practical and efficient, much like a pickup truck. When it came to camping gear, Gray had a preferred shopping destination, the Goodwill store in Port Townsend, Washington. There, he gathered items for his journey, including wool blankets, pots and pans, a toolbox, a stove, a deck of cards, a Holman Bible, a tent, fuel bottles, a case of Mountain House dehydrated meals, 2 first aid kits, carabiners, climbing crampons, a bow and quiver of arrows, a rain poncho, a sleeping bag, tarps, rope, and bungee cords.
Whenever you're in a wilderness situation, particularly one that's high altitude and remote, there's several things you have to contend with if you're trying to survive. You've got the temperature, you have potential wildlife and terrain-related injuries, you have the need for water, the need for food, and any of these things can become a major problem and potentially kill you if you're not ready for them and if you don't know how to deal with them.
Despite the harsh weather conditions that characterized northwestern Washington in the early days of April, Jacob, a skilled surfer who had grown up on the beach, remained undeterred. He had a deep connection with the water, which energized him in all its forms, whether he was surfing on it or simply riding in it. According to his father, Randy, Jacob's love for the water had been cultivated from a young age, and it was evident in the way he fearlessly rode the waves, regardless of the weather conditions. Despite the challenges posed by the harsh weather, Jacob's enthusiasm for his trip remained unwavering. Jacob's father said,
"Even if we don't go surfing, we'll get a coffee and go down to the beach and watch the sunrise. That sort of thing."
There were a few reported sightings of Jacob, but they were not very helpful in locating him. However, some of the sightings seemed credible. For instance, a man claimed to have seen Jacob twice in Indian Valley and along Crescent Lake on April 5. The next day, a woman reported seeing a man towing a red trailer climbing Fairholme Hill at 1 o'clock in the morning. Later that same morning, another woman passed Jacob as he was riding up the Salt Duck Hot Springs Road, which was about 2 miles from the 101. Later that afternoon, the same woman noticed Jacob's rig on the side of the road, which was 6.5 miles upriver from the 101. She was curious enough to snap a quick photo of the abandoned contraption, which was a flash of red and yellow against the green of the forest. However, it wasn't a good place to camp or stash a bike for long, as it was highly visible, not 10 yards from the road, and only 20 yards from the river. Despite these sightings, Jacob's whereabouts remained unknown. A ranger had recalled seeing the bike and gear, but didn't think much of it, assuming that the rider was on a short excursion on foot. This wasn't uncommon in the area since touring cyclists were a common sight, and Jacob was the first of many to come. However, it was evident that someone, possibly Jacob, had been organizing gear as there was a poly tarp spread out, surrounded by camping equipment. However, what caught the ranger's attention were the 4 arrows stuck in the ground in an east-west line near the tarp. While going missing isn't a crime or an emergency for individuals over 18, a person isn't considered missing until someone reports them as such. In this case, nobody had reported Jacob missing at all. It was rare for a cyclist to vanish, unlike hikers and runners. However, The fact that the bike remained untouched for most of the day piqued the Rangers' curiosity. On the afternoon of April 6th, Ranger John Bowie searched the area around the bike, hoping to find any clues. He wondered if the cyclist had gone to the river to filter some water or hitchhike to the hot springs. But if he had slipped and fallen into the sub-40-degree water, he would have sure succumbed. The following is the actual missing persons dispatch call to park rangers.
That's 741 Ron on North Point.
741 Ron.
I've got a bicycle that has went off the Salt Duck Road about mile marker 7, and I can't find anybody around it. You might want to send a ranger up here so we can see what's going on.
Copy, thanks for the info. 1630.
741 Ron, 611. 741 Ron, this is Echo 8 on North Point. I'll hit that way. Is that bicycle down the bank a ways, or is it easy to get to? It's easy to get to. It's got a little carrier on the back of it, too. It looked like it crashed off the road. Okay, so it didn't look like maybe somebody hit it there so they can go off for a hike. It doesn't look like anybody's hit it. It looks like he just went off the road. I'm going to stay here until you get up this way. Okay, I'll be coming over from Viola. 741 Ron.
When Ranger Bowie stumbled upon the bike and trailer, his heart sank as he feared the worst. However, to his relief, they were in excellent condition, fully operational with no signs of damage or malfunction. The trailer was loaded with a ton of equipment, which indicated that the owner had come fully prepared for his adventure. Despite the reassuring state of the bike and trailer, the Rangers couldn't shake off the uneasy feeling that something wasn't right. Their worst fears were confirmed when they scoured the Salt Duck Hot Springs resort, and no one had seen the owner. They suspected that he may have fallen into the river, but they had to keep searching to be sure. On that fateful Friday, Ranger Ray stumbled upon Jacob's wallet, ID, and a list of phone numbers. It confirmed the owner's identity but also heightened their concerns for his safety. Ray immediately contacted Jacob's sister, Mallory, and upon hearing the news she implored Ray to call their parents in Santa Cruz right away, hoping they could help in the search and bring Jacob home safely.
The case of Jacob Gray is interesting because we have someone who is very young, in his early 20s, and who had, by all accounts, a lot of experience with dealing with camping, even camping solo, and had a lot of equipment. He had a whole bicycle cart full of the type of gear that you would need to survive in just that type of environment. And that leads to the question, why didn't he survive? When he was discovered something around 15 miles from his main campsite where he had left most of his gear, he still had some of his gear on him. 15 miles is a long way, but it's not an unreasonable amount of distance for someone to cover in their early 20s who's experienced outdoorsman, but it does make you wonder why he was so far away from the area that he had stashed most of his gear.
After finding Jacob's abandoned bike and trailer, the Rangers scoured the surrounding area for any signs of evidence. They kicked through the dense ferns and combed the river banks, searching for anything that might indicate what had happened to the missing cyclist. Despite their efforts, the Rangers had very little to go on, other than the functioning bike and trailer. The equipment appeared to be in excellent condition, with no signs of damage or malfeasance. The tires were inflated, and there was no indication that Jacob had been hit by a vehicle. However, all signs seemed to point to the river as the likely location of Jacob's disappearance. The Olympic National Park Rangers concluded that he may have slipped and fallen into the water while trying to filter it into his camelback. They planned to search the river more thoroughly when the water levels went down in the summer. Jacob's mother, Laura, had spoken to him just a few nights before he set out on his journey. She knew that he was excited to embark on a cross-country tour to visit his brother in Vermont. Jacob had even mentioned that he might take 2 years to complete the trip, working odd jobs and seasonal work along the way. When Jacob's mother, Laura, reached out to the Rangers for help, they explained that their park was extremely understaffed and overburdened. The park covered an area that was 200,000 acres larger than Yosemite and received almost 4 million visitors each year. Unfortunately, due Due to budget cuts in 2013, nearly two-thirds of their law enforcement personnel had been transferred to other parks and not replaced. To compound their already overloaded situation, within a week of Jacob's bike being found, there were two other incidents in the park, a plane crash and another missing person. The Rangers were stretched thin and simply didn't have the resources or personnel to conduct a full-scale search for Jacob. It was a heartbreaking situation for Laura and Jacob's loved ones, who were left feeling helpless and frustrated by the lack of support from the park authorities. Randy, Jacob's father, dropped his hammer gun and threw his wetsuit into his truck. Rangers told him the bike was found near the river and Randy had a sense he'd be searching swift water. He picked up Mallory and sped north, driving the 1,000 miles from Santa Cruz straight through.
I drove all night. I got stopped going 100 miles an hour in Oregon. I told him what was going on. He said, "I'm not the last cop to not give you a ticket. Just be careful."
When Randy and Mallory arrived at the park, 5 days had already passed since the Rangers first discovered Jacob's abandoned bike. Other family members and friends, including Jacob's mother Laura, flew into SeaTac and drove to the park for what ended up being a tragic search and rescue mission. The family was surprised to learn that no ranger-assisted search had been launched yet. Unfortunately, national parks operate like sovereign countries, and search and rescue personnel from outside the park must be requested by park officials in order to initiate a search. Jacob's bike was discovered just 40 feet away from the river, which was 40 feet wide at the high water mark. On the other side of the river is the Olympic National Forest, which is under a different jurisdiction. Unlike national parks, national forests operate under the county model, and the Clallam County Sheriff's Department is responsible for search and rescue there, which is only a stone's throw away from the park. Randy and Danny suited up and entered the river, but they sensed lethargy from park officials and decided to take matters into their own hands. The family demanded an intense search, and Ranger Ray agreed to their request. Randy searched behind waterfalls, in deep holes, and under log jams while Mallory kicked through ferns, looking for any evidence. The family was surprised to find that the park had not requested any outside assistance, such as dog teams or aircraft from Whidbey Island Naval Air Station. Randy bushwhacked through thick brush and thorny Devil's Club in the rain, suffering from trench foot due to wet socks. Despite his physical discomfort, he remained determined to find his son alive. Surprisingly, the Coast Guard, based in Port Angeles, was not requested for assistance, nor were the aircraft from Whidbey Island Naval Air Station, which have been known to assist with some Olympic National Park searches. Time is of the essence in search and rescue operations, and the delay of 5 days and the lack of assistance from neighboring agencies greatly reduced the chances of finding Jacob alive. It was a devastating realization for the family, who were left feeling let down by the system and desperate for answers. Randy and Mallory arrived at the Olympic National Park on Tuesday, April 11th, 5 days after the Rangers discovered Jacob's bike. Laura, Jacob's mother, and Danny Campbell, Jacob's cousin, met them at the park. Despite the family's eagerness to initiate a search with dog teams, the park declined their offer and instead opted to keep the search in-house. After the discovery of a bike on April 6, 2017, the Clallam County Sheriff's Office conducted a search the following day with the help of approximately 30 people and dogs, but their efforts were fruitless. Olympic Mountain Rescue was called in nearly a week later on April 12, and during their search, they found evidence suggesting that someone had exchanged hiking boots for running shoes, walked towards the river, and slipped and fallen into it, leaving a mark on a mossy rock. Further downstream, there were signs that the individual may have attempted to climb out. However, a state fisheries biologist was assigned to look through the log jams in the river instead of swift water rescue divers. On April 13, the search for the individual became a search for a body instead of a live cyclist, and dog teams were brought in. 2 cadaver dogs indicated a log jam where a corpse might be trapped, but after searching all log jams for 12 miles on either side of the bike area, no body was found. The search operation continued in Olympic National Park throughout the week, but on April 14, the park transitioned into a limited continuous search, effectively ending the search by Olympic Rangers.
Did he become lost? Just got confused? Maybe despite being an avid outdoorsman, didn't have a lot of experience doing navigation, particularly in maybe inclement conditions or bad weather that are really common in the Pacific Northwest? Was he out there on purpose to commit suicide and no one knows about it? The fact that his body wasn't discovered until like a year later made it really hard, basically impossible, to determine exactly what happened and what was the cause of death.
After a period of over a year, specifically on the late afternoon of Friday, August 10, 2018, a group of biologists embarked on a trip into the mountains to study marmots. During their expedition, they stumbled upon the remains, clothing, and gear. The discovery was made at the top of a ridge located above Ho Lake, approximately 5,300 feet above sea level, and at a distance of at least 15 miles from where he abandoned his bicycle. The location where Jacob's remains were discovered was not near any trail, and during the time of his disappearance, which was in April, the terrain would have been covered in snow and potentially prone to avalanches. The remains were found on a treeless ridge, which could have been visible from the air.
Was it foul play? Or was there something even weirder that happened out there in the middle of the woods? It's always possible there was something natural, either a wild animal, or maybe he ate something that was poisonous, similar to what happened to Chris McCandless. So some of my questions are, if he did want to die, why isn't it more obvious what happened? And if he didn't, he seemingly had all the resources at his disposal to at least put up a good fight. He had a lighter on his body. It doesn't appear that he had made any fire or anything near to where his body was found. So there's lots of weird things that could have happened. Maybe there's another person that he met out there, someone who he knew before, maybe a stranger. Maybe it was someone who convinced him to go off the path that he was comfortable with, either accidentally or on purpose. Maybe they became separated, or maybe this person took him out into the woods on purpose and it was some kind of murder. While we'll almost certainly never know exactly what happened, we do know that a lot of things can go wrong when you're out in the woods, especially alone. So it's always good to make sure you're mentally, physically, and gear-wise prepared to be in a potential wilderness survival situation. And that's especially true if you're in a more remote, high-altitude location, like in this case. And it's usually a good idea to have a general plan ahead of time about where you're going to be and let someone else know about it. That way, if you don't get back in time, they have a specific place to look.
The story of Jacob Gray can serve as a cautionary tale for other hikers and can help them be more aware and prepared for the potential dangers of hiking in the wilderness. It highlights the importance of being prepared. Jacob Gray was an experienced hiker, but even he faced unexpected circumstances that led to his disappearance. This serves as a reminder that no matter how experienced a hiker is, it's essential to be well prepared for any situation. It emphasizes the importance of safety precautions. Gray's backpack was found on a trail near the summit of Mount Eleanor, indicating that he may have strayed from the marked trail. This underscores the importance of sticking to marked trails and avoiding shortcuts or unmarked paths. It encourages hikers to be more cautious. Hiking in the wilderness can be a wonderful experience, but it's important to remember that it can also be dangerous. The story of Jacob Gray can encourage hikers to be more cautious and aware of their surroundings while on the trail. It reinforces the need for communication. Gray's family reported him missing when he did not return from his hike. This highlights the importance of letting someone know your plans before heading out on a hike and staying in communication with others while on the trail. In summary, the story of Jacob Gray can help other hikers by reminding them of the importance of being prepared, taking safety precautions, being cautious, and communicating their plans with others. By taking these steps, hikers can minimize the risks and enjoy a safer and more enjoyable hiking experience in the wilderness. Konstantinos Philippidis, a 49-year-old Toronto firefighter, commonly referred to as Danny, was skiing at Whiteface Mountain in Wilmington, New York on Wednesday, February 7, 2018. He was part of an annual ski trip organized for off-duty and retired firefighters. Along with 8 others who joined him on vacation, he was considered an intermediate skier. Whiteface Mountain is one of the highest peaks in the Adirondacks, offering a range of ski trails, wooded areas, trees, and rocks. This was the final day of their skiing trip, and they were preparing to return home after enjoying their winter vacation at this popular ski destination. At approximately 2:30 p.m., one of the members of the group, feeling exhausted, suggested that they should leave. However, Konstantinos Philippidis expressed his desire to take one last run down the mountain before heading back. Consequently, he decided to ski alone for one final attempt while his friends waited for him at the lodge situated halfway down the mountain. Unfortunately, a powerful snowstorm started, causing the area to have poor visibility. After waiting for around an hour and a half, until 4 p.m., the ski lift stopped operating for the day, and Philippidis was nowhere to be found. His friends waited for an additional 30 minutes before becoming concerned about his whereabouts and subsequently reported him missing at 4:30 p.m. Philippidis' friends initially decided to check at the resort where they were staying, hoping that he may have returned there. However, they were alarmed to discover his car, passport, phone, and ID exactly where he had left them earlier in the day. A search operation was immediately launched to locate Philippidis on the mountain. Forest rangers, ski patrol personnel, and other skiers all participated in scouring the slopes to locate the missing firefighter. Despite their exhaustive efforts, Philippidis remained unaccounted for as the evening progressed, and the weather conditions worsened. On the following day, more people joined the search, including New York State Police, Homeland Security, U.S. border officials, and volunteers. The news of their missing colleague compelled over 100 Toronto firefighters to travel to Lake Placid to assist with the search operation, with colleagues agreeing to cover their shifts. The search teams deployed helicopters, drones, and sniffer dogs to scour the mountain in search of Philippidis. He was last seen wearing a green ski jacket, black helmet, goggles, and red skis. For almost a week, approximately 6,000 people, including Philippidis' wife, tirelessly searched for the missing firefighter in the Lake Placid area. As each day passed, the hope of finding him alive began to fade. However, astonishingly, after being missing for 6 days, Philippidis was discovered alive and well, over 4,500 kilometers away in California. On Tuesday, February 13th, at 9:30 a.m., Philippidis' wife was meeting the search party in Lake Placid when she received a call from an unfamiliar number. When she answered, she recognized her lost husband's voice immediately, who referred to her by her nickname. He informed her that he was alone at Sacramento Airport in California, which was approximately 4,670 kilometers away and on the other side of the country. She advised him to seek help immediately. Upon making contact with Philippidis, law enforcement officers were able to locate him in the car rental terminal of Sacramento Airport, still dressed in the same ski clothes he was wearing when he went missing 6 days earlier in New York. Remarkably, he was still wearing his ski jacket, boots, and carrying his ski helmet. Philippidis was discovered in a disorientated state, so much so that when he was asked to describe the color of a blue sign, he mistakenly said it was green and was unable to recall the current date. Along with his skiing attire, he had recently purchased an iPhone, had a credit card, $1,000 in cash, and had even managed to get a haircut. Initially, Philippidis told police that he had no recollection of how he had gotten to Sacramento from New York, but suspected that he had suffered a head injury. He did, however, recall riding as a passenger in a truck that resembled a big rig, and that he slept a lot during the journey. Surprisingly, he had no recollection of purchasing the new phone to call his wife. Due to his confused state, he was immediately transported to the hospital to be examined for possible head injuries. However, he was discharged later without any signs of injuries reported. Sergeant Sean Hampton of the Sacramento County Sheriff's Department reported that after being located, Philippidis was questioned by officers and they determined that he was not under the influence of drugs or alcohol. According to Hampton, Philippidis claimed that he was dropped off in Sacramento the night before he called the police and must have slept on the streets near the Richards Boulevard along the Interstate 5 corridor. However, it is unclear how he managed to get to the airport from that location. It is speculated that he may have taken a taxi before contacting his wife. In the days that followed, officials from New York and Sacramento issued additional statements on the matter. The police released a photo of Philippidis that was taken when he was found in California, hoping that someone who recognizes him could provide more information about his journey. After being discharged from the hospital, Philippidis returned to the Adirondacks to speak with police, who continued their investigation into the strange circumstances of his disappearance. He was eventually allowed to return home to Toronto with his family, where he resumed his duties as a captain with the Toronto Fire Services. Frank Ramagnano, president of the Toronto Professional Firefighters Association, spoke briefly with Philippidis upon his return, but didn't ask too many questions to avoid causing him any additional stress. Meanwhile, police made an appeal for the truck driver who had apparently given Philippidis a ride to get in touch, but no new information was forthcoming. As speculation about what had happened to Philippidis during his 6-day disappearance continued to grow, it wasn't until 6 months later that he himself finally spoke out about the incident, revealing his version of events to the public. In an interview, Philippidis provided his own account of what happened during his 6-day disappearance. He stated that he believes he may have taken a wrong turn on his way to the car and lost consciousness shortly after separating from his friends. When he regained consciousness, he headed towards what he thought was the main ski lodge, only to find it closed and deserted. Later investigations determined that he probably fell near the children's ski slope and made his way to the hub of the kids area, which would have been closed at that time. Still disoriented and unable to find his car, Philippidis claimed that he hailed down a truck and climbed into the cabin area to get a ride back into town. However, he could not provide any details about the driver or the truck he was in. Philippidis believed that he may have slept for long periods during the journey. He stated that he did not know how he ended up in Sacramento, but assumed that he must have been dropped off there by the truck driver. During the long journey, Philippidis claims that he only had vague moments of consciousness, including being sick at what he believed to be a truck stop and learning that he was driving through Utah. He also remembers experiencing intense fatigue and headaches that left him sleeping for most of the journey. As the journey came to an end, the truck driver told Philippidis that they had reached Sacramento before dropping him off and leaving. Philippidis stated that he had no idea who the driver was or what they spoke about, but he did recall that the driver had a generic name which he gave to authorities. Upon reaching downtown Sacramento, Philippidis, who had been missing for 5 days with no ID or phone, decided to find a way to contact his wife. He withdrew $1,000 in cash from his credit card and purchased a new iPhone. Philippidis was found in a disoriented state by police at the airport's car rental terminal, still wearing his ski clothes, and was immediately taken to the hospital for assessment. He was later discharged with no reported signs of injuries. According to Philippidis in an interview, he revealed that after buying a new phone, he couldn't recall his wife's number immediately. Instead, he searched online for Whiteface Mountain and discovered that he was a missing person. Instead of calling 911 or going to the police for help, he chose to spend the night sleeping on the streets near Richards Boulevard. The following day, Tuesday 13 February, Philippidis, still dressed in his ski gear, sought a ride to Sacramento Airport. Finally, he remembered his wife's number and called her. She then instructed him to call 911 for help. Upon reaching the rental car terminal of the airport, the police were able to find and assist Philippidis. According to medical professionals, Philippidis' memory loss and subsequent actions can be explained by 2 possible causes. Dr. Charles Tater, a brain surgeon from Toronto, has put forward the first theory that suggests that Philippidis may have experienced amnesia as a result of a concussion. Dr. Tater explains that the incident could be a combination of 2 types of amnesia, namely retrograde amnesia, which involves a loss of memory before a head injury, and anterograde amnesia, which involves a loss of memory after a head injury. If Philippidis sustained a significant head injury while skiing, the resulting concussion could have caused him to experience memory loss, which can last for a few seconds to up to 24 or 48 hours. However, this theory does not explain the entire extent of Philippidis' memory loss, and Dr. Tater himself has stated that his days-long episode was unusual. Dr. Jennifer Ryan, a senior scientist at the Rotman Research Institute at Baycrest in Toronto, suggests a second theory regarding Philippidis' memory loss and actions, proposing that he experienced a dissociative fugue state. This rare condition, triggered by head injury, trauma, or emotional disturbance, causes a temporary loss of personal identity, leading individuals to impulsively wander away from familiar surroundings. People with dissociative fugue are often confused about their identity and may even create new ones. Although they show no outward signs of illness or injury, their normal behavior changes, and they struggle to remember who they are and where they are. Dr. Ryan explains that typically, people with this disorder don't remember the traveling itself, and their memory usually returns when they find themselves in an unfamiliar place. A fugue state may explain Philippidis' behavior during the days he was missing. Amnesic episodes like Philippidis can be problematic since some people never fully regain their lost memories, resulting in islands of memory that remain forever lost. Consequently, it's possible that we may never uncover some of the missing pieces to the puzzle unless Philippidis' memory fragments return. The story of Konstantinos Danny Philippidis is a baffling and intriguing one that continues to raise questions. Despite extensive investigations by law enforcement agencies, medical professionals, and the media, there is still no definitive explanation for what happened during his 5-day disappearance. Theories of retrograde and anterograde amnesia and dissociative fugue have been put forward, but none of them can fully account for all the missing details. Philippidis' own account of his experience is also limited, as he claims to have lost significant periods of memory. Ultimately, the case remains shrouded in mystery, and it is unclear whether we will ever learn the truth behind what happened to Philippidis during those fateful 5 days in February 2018.
The first snowfall of the year is usually a beautiful and joyous celebration in the small ski town of Mammoth Lakes in California's Eastern Sierra. But the early October snow in 2013 was disheartening for the searchers of a missing Pennsylvania man. Hope was fading with the inevitable change in season, and those close to him were starting to understand the grave reality that he may never be found. From more than 2,500 miles away, his loved ones experienced a tug-of-war between despair and optimism, feeling helpless across the country as they went through the motions of their daily lives. 3 months earlier, in July, the 39-year-old high school math teacher dropped his car off at a Mammoth Auto car shop for repairs. He was visiting the area for a summer climbing vacation when the car blew a head gasket. The friends Green was traveling with headed home, and Green planned to drive to Colorado to join other friends for more climbing as soon as his car was ready. "I may have to spend the rest of my life here in Mammoth," he texted to a friend as he got more and more frustrated with how long the repair was taking. He was anxious to get on with his trip. No one has heard from Green since he last talked to his parents on July 16, 2013. He did not tell anyone his plans for the following day. He never picked up his car. His campsite was left tidy, and his credit cards and phone have not been used since. Matthew had a habit of ripping out pages from a guidebook as to where he planned to hike, instead of taking the entire book with him. When he returned from a hike, he would replace the missing pages as a trophy of sorts. The only clue that was found was a few pages torn from a mountaineering guidebook, and this pointed toward the Minarets and Ritter Range in the Ansel Adams Wilderness. At the time, Mammoth Lakes was experiencing sunshine and above-average temperatures. On July 29, 2013, Matthew Green was reported missing, and his body has not been found in the years since. In 2013, more than 600,000 Americans were reported missing in the United States, according to the FBI and National Crime Information Center. At the end of the year, nearly 85,000 of those cases were still active. At the time he went missing, Matthew Green was the only unsolved missing person case in Mammoth Lakes, and in January 2014, Reed's family filed for a death certificate in Pennsylvania. But the case is still open with the Mammoth Lakes Police Department. Most people assume that Matt was a victim of some sort of climbing accident, a fall of some sort, said his friend John Greco, that met him in California. But all his friends agreed that he was experienced, skilled, and careful in the mountains. Born on September 8, 1973, to Robert and Patricia Green, Matthew is the second of 4 children. He grew up in rural Pennsylvania, developing a love for the outdoors from a young age. He was a Boy Scout and often went hunting and fishing with his dad. Growing up in the boondocks of Franklin Townships was a blessing. Green wrote in 1999 in a letter to his sister, Tiffany Minto, when he was in the Peace Corps. "I came out of there with independence, a love of nature, and a determination to succeed in school, life, or whatever. When they were kids, Green would take Minto fishing and target shooting at the lake, where they'd stay until bugs feasted on their arms. They went hiking together often, even in the really cold winters common to the Northeast. The ice didn't slow him down one bit. I struggled to keep up," Minto said. Green loved to run, competing on the track team in high school and running the Boston Marathon a few times as an adult. As the student speaker for his high school graduation, Green urged his classmates to take chances. "The time has come to fulfill our current goals and to set new ones to be conquered later." In our future travels and endeavors, no matter where they take us, we must not use our youthful imaginations. We must not be too scared to take risks, and most of all, we must live life to the fullest. Matthews said in his high school graduation speech. Green went on to study at Clemson University in South Carolina before transferring to and graduating from Penn State University. As a Peace Corps volunteer on a teaching assignment in Papua New Guinea from 1998 to 2001, he regularly wrote letters to her sister giving her advice on life, college, and relationships. Any associations you have in your life can be lumped into one of these three categories: people who push you forward, people who drag you down, and people who do neither, he wrote. He also wrote to friends, telling tales of his adventures, like walking 6 hours to fix a radio transceiver in a hiking tour, which was a 9-hour trek across dense brush and mountainous terrain, where he found himself crossing a roaring 100-foot waterfall, wading for shallow rivers, carefully walking and descending countless valleys. In his letters, Green not only gave accounts of his work and explorations, but he also contemplated life and its greater meanings. He wrote, "It's a pitiful thing when people reach the point in their lives where passionate inclinations in their lives no longer win out over regular routines. I don't know why our minds always gravitate towards reason. It's a nuisance. At least for me. It takes a lot of mental effort to give in to his passions, but once I've devoted myself to them, I'm never plagued with regret." When he returned from the Peace Corps, Green got a job as a high school math teacher in Pennsylvania and would go on summer climbing trips to fulfill his needs for adventure. He often traveled out west solo for camping, hiking, and climbing, occasionally meeting up with friends along the way. In 2006, he road tripped through South Dakota, Wyoming, and on to Red Lodge, Montana. When his car broke down at the end of the trip, he tooled around town and hitchhiked to a trailhead. In his trip log, he wrote, over the course of a few days, "I put in an awesome 10-hour hike. The rock was surprisingly solid. Yet, some big pieces moved. I returned to find that rodents had torn into my engine plug wires, vacuum hoses, and mostly wire sheathing. I coasted into town and took my car into the shop. They should get to it tomorrow morning." The next day, he wrote, "Same as yesterday, no car yet. Hitched a ride out to the Bear Track and hiked up the Silver Plateau. It's awesome up there. Good mix of pines and open fields. More reading, more net searching, coming up with a plan. Yellowstone, climb Tiwanaut, Wind River Range, ring the bells, maybe the Great Sands Dunes, and Long's Peak, then home. Still waiting on that car." Green arrived in Mammoth Lake a few days before he met up with his friends John and Jill Greco on June 28, 2013. He set up camp at New Shady Rest Campground on the edge of town and paid for July 7th. John, Jill, and their 9-year-old son checked in at a hotel nearby. Over the next 10 days, Green and John climbed many of the region's classic routes, places like Crystal Crag, Clark's Canyon, and the Gong Show Crag. They also hiked a few of the Eastern Sierra's classic alpine routes. Green kept a handwritten log of his climbs, sometimes elaborate and other times brief. He often checked and reported conditions on websites. During this trip, he wrote on Summit Post, "Did the V-notch on Saturday, July 6th. We easily crossed it via a snow bridge. We studied the route well for signs of rockfall before committing, and only had one baseball-sized rock rocket down during our ascent. Tons of rocks were falling the U-notch." During Green's time in Mammoth, his Subaru was in and out of the auto repair shop. It would get fixed, then overheat, driving up a steep grade and go back to the mechanic. It was finally diagnosed with a blown head gasket, which would take additional time to repair. On July 7th, John and Jill were scheduled to leave Mammoth Lakes. John had a work meeting in Southern California the next day, and Matt planned to leave for Colorado to meet up with some other friends. That morning, the whole group hiked to Emerald Lake in the Mammoth Lakes Basin before Matt continued up the trail to the Mammoth Crest, and John and Jill headed down to their car to begin the drive. It was the last time any of Matt's friends would ever see him again. As we were walking down the trail, I say to my husband, "You know, he goes off like this, and he doesn't tell anybody. If something happens to him, nobody will know where to look," Jill said. Her husband said, "Yeah, and the bad thing about it is that his car won't be at the trailhead." Even though Green had planned to leave that day as well, his car was still in the shop. He was fine being stuck in Mammoth. It's not like he was in the middle of some remote backcountry area. There were shuttles to take you all over the place, and he thought it was only going to be a couple of days. Over the next 8 days, Green continued to climb classic Sierra peaks and routes, checking in with John and Jill by text message every few days. On July 8th, Green soloed Regal Huff Minaret, a 10,560-foot spire in the Ritter Range west of Mammoth Lakes. On July 9th, Green headed north to climb Dana Kowar, a popular 1,200-foot ice route on a 13,000-foot peak near Yosemite Park's entrance. Later, he sent John an update. The Regal Huff Minaret took less than 6.5 hours round trip, but was scary, and the Dana Kowar was easy but fun and had the best ice of the trip. July 10th was a rest day. On July 11th, Green took the shuttle to Red's Meadow Valley to hike and climb in the Minarets and Ritter Range again. On the ride to the trailhead, he spoke to a Devil's Post maintenance worker. They talked about climbing Mount Ritter, Banner Peak, Clyde Minaret, and the cross-country hikes between the Minaret Lakes. Matthew was not sure of his itinerary for the day when he got off the shuttle at the Devil's Post Pile trailhead, but he eventually climbed the 12,280-foot Clyde Minaret, the tallest of the Minaret's jagged peaks. From July 12th to the 15th, Green hiked the cross-country route on Mammoth Crest, and he climbed Unicorn Peak in Yosemite's high country. On July 16th, he went to the Mammoth Lakes Library to use the internet. He called his parents and the mechanic, then sent a few text messages and made a small purchase at Rite Aid. He paid the campground for the night and the next day. Since Jill and John left Mammoth, they continued texting back and forth with Green every few days. Jill updated him on details for a trip to France they were tentatively planning later that summer, and John received updates on the climbs Green had done. Jill grew concerned when Green stopped responding to texts. At first, she didn't think anything about it. Then she called him, and her husband sent him a text. Again, they didn't hear from him. On July 21st, after 3 unpaid nights, the host at the campground reported the abandoned campsite and suspicion of a missing person to the Mammoth Lakes Police Department. 2 officers responded to the call, visited the campground, and recorded the information on a police log. Campsite number 164 was left intact, but Green had not returned to it. His neatly folded laundry was stored inside the tent along with some gear. His food was in the bear box. MLPD Detective Dung Hordback said, "We can't really do a whole lot unless a missing person report is filed. We'll get a name and the information, we'll put it on the log, and that's as far as it goes at this point." So the campsite was broken down, Green's gear was put into storage, and new campers soon occupied the site. On July 26, Green's mom expressed concern that she hadn't heard from Matt. She'd been leaving messages that went unanswered. But Green often went on long hikes and backpacking trips and didn't return messages immediately. Sometimes it would take him days or weeks to readjust to society after a good trek. He enjoyed the solitude of the wilderness and was not into technology, so his sister Minto brushed off his mom's concerns. She said he probably couldn't charge his phone or was spending some time in the backcountry. They knew that Green could not use his car phone charger because his Subaru was still in the shop, so she thought maybe his phone was dead. Still, she knew that his lack of response was unusual, and she grew increasingly concerned when she didn't hear from him for 10 days. John called Tony, Green's friend, that he was planning to meet in Colorado to see if Green had arrived. Maybe he was spending time in the backcountry, Tony suggested. On July 29th, 7 days after Green's campsite was packed up and put into storage, Jill called the Norco Goodyear to inquire about his car. She was told it had been ready since July 18th. Green had not responded to a message saying the car was ready, and he had not picked it up. Jill then called the Mammoth Lakes Welcome Center and talked to a ranger. She asked for someone to check on his campsite, and the ranger insisted she file a missing persons report. 13 days after Green disappeared, he was officially reported missing. Green was no stranger to climbing mountains. His list of ascents logged on Summit Post read like the resume of an experienced mountaineer. His friends said he was skillful on ice, calculated in the outdoors, and did not take risks. More than 2 weeks after Green talked to his parents for the last time, Detective Hornbeck contacted Verizon for an emergency information request. Verizon concluded that Green's phone had been powered off for quite some time, and there was no way to track the current location. The last ping was registered to the cellular tower on Mammoth Mountain on July 16th. According to Detective Hornbeck, the ping created a cone-shaped triangle with towers in Fresno and June Lake, indicated that Green's phone was located within that region, which consists of mostly of the Ansel Adams wilderness. The Mammoth Lakes Police Department did not find any evidence of foul play, and the possibility of suicide was quickly ruled out. Green did not have any financial trouble. He was single and showed no signs of depression. When the Grecos last saw him in Mammoth, Jill said he was as normal and optimistic as he normally was. On July 31st, Detective Hornbeck notified Bill Green, no relation, at Mono County Sheriff's Search and Rescue. Typically, when a person is reported overdue in the mountains, SAR launches an investigation. They are quick to respond and have a healthy roster of volunteers that are experienced mountaineers, but Matthew Green did not tell anyone where he was going. And his car was still at the mechanics, so they didn't even have a trailhead to go from. Without a known location, SAR could not begin a search. Matthew Green could have gone anywhere. Most of his equipment was stored in his car, which was parked outside the Norco Goodyear while waiting for repair, meaning he had access to his personal belongings 24 hours a day. From an inventory of the equipment left in his car and tent, friends were able to deduce what he was carrying with him. He was probably wearing a blue outdoor ball cap, a black t-shirt over a long-sleeve green shirt, and mountaineering approach shoes. He had a large black and white mountain hardware backpack, an ice axe, black diamond crampons, and was either carrying or wearing boots. He did not have overnight gear. Since he had no vehicle, Green's only option to get to trailheads was to either walk, hitchhike, or public transport. With a number of local shuttle services, which Green had used in the week prior to his disappearance, he could have made it to a number of trailheads, from the Mammoth Lakes Basin to Yosemite Valley. From the guidebook found in his belongings, Chapter 12 was torn out, which included minarets and June Lake. With the shuttle to Red's Meadow, Green could have been at any one of 3 main trailheads in the valley that leads to a network of paths that access the trail ranges in the wilderness. The 231,533-acre wilderness area is located west of Mammoth Lakes and the Sierra Nevada crest in Madera County. It shares a border with Yosemite National Park to the north and the 581,000-acre John Muir Wilderness to the south. The region is popular for hiking, backpacking, and climbing. The mountain range is vast and rugged. Even though SAR could not launch a full-on search without a known destination, they sent teams to the Minaret region on training missions. They checked summit registers in the range, and a helicopter team did a flyover. Detective Hornback worked with the U.S. Forest Service to contact people with overnight wilderness permits for the region. If anyone spoke with Green on the trail or shuttle or gave him a ride, they have not come forward yet, or they do not know he is missing. Green's family hired an aerial tour company to fly over the region. They mounted a red digital camera to the wing of an old Piper airplane. The camera is capable of recording high-quality images at 30 frames per second while being zoomed in at 3x. They recorded 100 gigabytes of data that was later processed and examined, but showed no evidence of Green. Detective Hornback followed up on every single tip. Psychics from around the world called with information after looking into a crystal ball or having a dream. A retired police officer in Minden, Nevada, reported a sighting of a young man that fit the description of Green at a Nevada gas station. A woman said she had given Green and his dog a ride to Colorado, but Green did not have a dog. Glasses were found near the Inyo Crater's trailhead less than 10 miles from Green's campsite, but the prescription did not match. The police talked with campers in the lakes adjacent to Green's. They interviewed the employees at the auto shop. No one had any concrete information. What frustrated them the most was that he was so experienced, but he didn't tell anyone where he was going. There's nothing wrong with sending a text and saying, "Hey, I'm going to go climb in the Minarets today." That would solve a lot of problems. Detective Hornbeck said, Green's sister began compiling facts and information, creating a Find Matthew Green Facebook page. She did interviews with reporters. Friends started forum on climbing websites seeking information. Conversations were started and theories were tossed around. Where would Matthew Green have gone? The MLPD press release was published in the local papers. Media outlets in Pennsylvania picked up the story, and a short news brief made it Los Angeles Times. What makes the Minarets so appealing to climbers is also what makes the Rubbit Peak so dangerous for climbing. The Ritter Range is located within the Sierra Nevada, just west of the crest. The jagged landscape of the Minarets and sharp summits of Mount Ritter and Banner Peak can be seen from all over Mammoth Lakes. The range stands tall and mighty, separating the Sierra from the rounder mountains in the coastal range. Unlike the granite that makes up much of the Sierra, the Ritter Range is metavolcanic rock, which was formed in several volcanic supereruptions, according to Alan Glassner, professor of geology at the University of North Carolina and author of a book about the geology in and around Yosemite. These eruptions produce hot volcanic rock deposits that flow much like an avalanche. Metavolcanic rocks are generally kind of sketchy for climbing because they flake apart easily and are not nearly as strong as granite. That's why they form spiky landform like the Minarets instead of big smooth cliffs like Half Dome. It's been years since Matthew Green disappeared from Mammoth Lakes, and still no trace of him has surfaced. In August 2014, his campground neighbors returned to the area and saw a missing persons sign. They called the police department and met with Detective Hornbeck and Bill Green from Search and Rescue. They said they invited Matthew to go for a hike with them, but he declined. He did not say, or they could not remember where he was going. Since Green was carrying an ice axe and crampons, Mount Ritter is a logical guess for his destination on July 17, 2013. The Southeast Glacier is the most prominent snow route in the range. The trailhead is accessible from public transportation, was in the chapter of the guidebook that he was carrying. For even the fittest of mountaineers, climbing Mount Ritter in one day is a huge feat, and the hike is 7 miles one way. And then it is another 4,000 vertical feet of off-trail hiking and climbing to reach the summit. At the time of Matt's disappearance, I had a pretty strong suspicion that he had gone to Mount Ritter, but after reflecting on it and revisiting the area last summer, I am not so sure, said John Greco. I don't think the climb itself would be particularly appealing to Matt. It seems like somewhat of a slog with limited technical challenges. Green did not have any unknown pre-existing medical conditions, and an animal attack is doubtful, as no evidence were ever found. There has never been a human death by mountain lion or black bear in the region, and grizzly bears haven't been there since the 1920s. It seems likely that Matthew Green had a fatal climbing accident. Maybe he would have set out to climb the region's tallest and most prolific mountain on his last day in the area, but there is no hard evidence. If Matthew Green hitchhiked like he had been known to do in the past, he could be anywhere. And since he had climbed in the minarets a few days prior to his disappearance, it is possible that the chapter of the guidebook was still in his pack. But there was enough suspicion that multiple search parties focused on the minarets and the Ritter Range. Green's close friend and climbing partners went to Mammoth Lakes to search in August 2013, and a number of local climbers and mountaineers have spearheaded their own small search parties in search of Matthew. Dean Rosnaw, a former SAR officer and member, has spent nearly 30 days searching for Green. In August 2013, Rosnaw focused on the minarets. But late that summer, he began to gravitate toward Ritter and Banner. In a search area so vast, what we are looking for is so small. One will literally have to step on the evidence to find it, Rosnaw said. A lot of gear has been hauled out of the wilderness areas that surround Mammoth Lakes, but none of it has been identified as Matthew Green's. The unknown and lack of resolution is part of a grieving process unlike any other. When the snow started to fall in 2013, the search came to a halt and the missing person posters were taken down for the season. The family petitioned for and received a death certificate in Pennsylvania so they could settle his affairs. There has been no memorial service. The hardest part is the not knowing, said his friend Tom Davidoff. If he had let someone know where he was going, we'd have a completely different situation. But you can't get mad at him. We've all done it. Green's closest friends and climbing partners each say they don't climb as much as they used to, and most of them can't really explain why, other than the disappearance of Matthew. There is a lingering feeling of disappearance and sorrow that just dampens their enthusiasm. Greco hasn't done any mountain climbing since Matt disappeared, with the exception of the searches that they did for him. He can attribute it to a lack of partners, work, and family responsibilities getting in the way, but in truth, I just haven't been motivated to make it happen, he said. In 2014, Green's father, Robert, spent the summer in Mammoth Lakes. At 69 years old, he was slightly overweight and out of shape, but he began training so he was conditioned to hike in the High Sierra. He wanted to spend the summer in the mountains where his son is presumed dead, and he hiked nearly 700 miles that summer. He explored the trails that Matt had enjoyed. He searched with Rosnaw, and he climbed for the first time. Greco led Robert up Crystal Crag so he could stand on a summit that Matt had also stood on in the year prior. Green's mother wanted him to get a taste of the kind of climbing Matt loved to do most, so he could hopefully understand the appeal and attraction She just kept thinking about how Matt would have enjoyed watching his dad climb, something I'm sure he never would have considered doing before Matt's disappearance. Green's mother, Patricia, visited Mammoth Lakes that summer for the first and only time for 1 week with her daughter. Not a hiker, Patricia spent most of the time in town, while Minto hit the trails with her father. She felt completely at peace and in awe of the beauty. But turning home just felt like she was turning her back on Matt and the possibility of finding him. She wished she could move on, but it's just impossible. To this day, no trace of Matthew Green has ever been found. What do you think happened to Matthew Green in the mountains? Let me know in the comments below. Welcome back to a universe of mystery. On today's episode, we'll delve into the tragic story of Jody Zetchik and Gerald Duran, a couple who attempted to hike the Pacific Coast Trail, or PCT for short, in the winter of 1983. Their decision to take on the treacherous winter conditions led to a fateful event that ultimately cost them their lives. Jody Zetchik and Gerald Duran were a young, adventurous couple who shared a love for the outdoors. In 1983, they decided to take on the ambitious challenge of hiking the Pacific Crest Trail, a 2,650-mile-long trail that stretches from the United States-Mexico border in California to the United States-Canadian border in Washington. The trail generally takes around 5 months to complete, and many hikers choose to hike it during the warmer months. However, Jody and Gerald made the fateful decision to attempt the trail during the winter. Jody and Gerald set off on their winter adventure. Beginning at the northern end of the trail in Washington, they planned to travel south towards Wrightwood, California, where they would stock up on supplies before continuing their journey. As they made their way down the trail, they encountered freezing temperatures, snowstorms, and treacherous terrain. Despite these challenges, the couple pressed on, determined to complete their quest. As Jody and Gerald neared Wrightwood, they made a critical error. They mistakenly descended into the wrong canyon, leading them into much steeper terrain than they anticipated or prepared for. As they continued downward, the already dangerous conditions grew worse, with icy slopes making the descent even more treacherous. As the couple tried to navigate the icy slopes, tragedy struck. They slipped on the ice, losing their footing and falling close to 100 feet down a steep incline. The fall proved to be fatal for both Jody and Gerald, and their dream of conquering the Pacific Crest Trail during the winter came to a tragic end. On December 3, 1983, search and rescue teams located the body of Jody and Gerald. The efforts to find them had been difficult, as the winter conditions made the search area even more dangerous for the rescuers. The terrain, combined with the weather, had created an environment where accidents were all too common. The tragic loss of Jody and Gerald serves as a somber reminder of the risks associated with taking on extreme outdoor adventures. Their story highlights the importance of proper planning, knowledge of the terrain, and respect for the environment, especially when faced with harsh winter conditions. In the wake of Jody and Gerald's tragic deaths, the hiking community has learned several lessons. One is the importance of knowing one's limits and being aware of the dangers associated with undertaking a challenging hike like the Pacific Crest Trail in the wintertime. Additionally, proper preparation and planning are crucial, as the couple's decision to descend into the wrong canyon ultimately led to their demise. Another lesson from Jody and Gerald's story is the importance of having the right safety gear and training for the conditions encountered on a hike. In this case, the couple would have benefited from equipment such as crampons, ice axes, and ropes, which could have helped them navigate the icy slopes more safely. Furthermore, training and mountaineering skills could have potentially saved their lives. Jody and Gerald's tragic end serves as a reminder of the immense power of nature and the need to respect it. While the allure of conquering a challenging hike like the Pacific Crest Trail in winter can be tempting, it is essential to remember that nature can be unforgiving, especially during harsh conditions. The story reinforces the importance of making well-informed decisions when embarking on any outdoor adventure, taking into account the potential risks and preparing accordingly. Although their story ended in tragedy, Jody and Gerald's ambitious attempt to hike the Pacific Crest Trail in winter has left a lasting impact on the hiking community. Their story has inspired others to push their limits, while also serving as a cautionary tale about the importance of proper preparation, respecting nature, and making informed decisions. Since Jody and Gerald's ill-fated journey, the Pacific Crest Trail has continued to grow in popularity, attracting hikers from all over the world. While most still choose to hike the trail during the warmer months, their story has not deterred a select few from attempting the trail during the winter. Those who do, however, are now more likely to be better prepared, thanks in part to the lessons learned from Jody and Gerald's tragic end. Now, we'll dive into the unsolved mystery of Chris Sherpa Fowler, an experienced hiker who vanished while attempting to complete the Pacific Crest Trail in 2016. Join us as we unravel the details of his disappearance, the ongoing search efforts, and the relentless determination of his stepmother to bring him home. Chris Fowler, a 34-year-old outdoorsman from Ohio, embarked on an adventure of a lifetime in 2016. He set out to hike the PCT, a 2,650-mile trail that stretches from Mexico to Canada, traversing diverse landscapes from desert to mountain ranges. Chris began his journey well prepared, training with a friend in Colorado and planning for packages to be sent to multiple checkpoints along the trail. He started the hike with his friend, but they agreed to separate if their pace changed. Along the way, Chris earned the trail name Sherpa and regularly checked in with his family and friends. On October 12, 2016, with less than 400 miles left to complete the PCT, Chris disappeared. He was last seen at a Cracker Barrel in White Press, Washington, where he stopped for coffee before heading back to the trail. His phone was shut off about an hour later, and he was never seen again. When Chris's parents realized they hadn't heard from him in 3 weeks, they contacted authorities, friends, and fellow hikers. The Yakima County Sheriff's Office began an extensive search, eventually concluding that Chris had likely been caught in a powerful storm unprepared and succumbed to the elements or hypothermia. Despite the official conclusion, many theories have circulated about Chris's fate. Some believe he intentionally disappeared, while others suggest he fell victim to an animal attack or foul play. However, no solid evidence has been found to support any of these theories. Sally Fowler, Chris's stepmother, had dedicated herself to finding her son. She had retraced his steps, organized search efforts, and used social media to share his story. Through her dedication, she became a vital member of the hiking community, advocating for safety measures and helping families of other missing hikers. In collaboration with the family of another missing PCT hiker, David O'Sullivan, Sally co-founded the Fowler O'Sullivan Foundation. The foundation helps families of missing hikers navigate the search process, connects them to resources, and supports initiatives to prevent future missing hiker cases. Despite years of searching, Chris Fowler remains missing. His stepmother and the hiking community continue to hold on to the hope that he may still be found. If you have any information about Chris's case, please contact the Yakima County Sheriff's Office at 509-574-2535. Now we'll explore the mysterious disappearance of Christopher Sylvia, an experienced hiker who vanished while hiking the Pacific Crest Trail. We'll be taking a close look at the details surrounding his disappearance, discussing the search efforts that took place, and pondering the possibilities of what could have happened to him. Chris Sylvia was a 28-year-old hiker who was last seen on February 16, 2015, wearing brown hiking boots, a dark-colored jacket, and green pants. He had set out on the Pacific Crest Trail from Anza, California on February 12, 2015. On February 16th, he called his friend and roommate, Min Kim, to schedule a supply pickup near Warner Springs at the Buddhist Temple in northern San Diego County on Chickawa Valley Road. Chris never arrived at the agreed-upon location, and his friend did not report him missing until February 24th, when he was expected to reach his final destination. On February 24th, hikers found a sleeping bag, sleeping pad, and backpack that appeared to belong to Chris, as well as his ID, approximately 13 miles off Highway 79, north of Warner Springs. The San Diego Sheriff's Office called off the search for Chris on March 3, 2015, due to weather conditions. He had been missing for 2 weeks at that time. It's important to note that this is not the type of terrain that could easily hide a body. There are mountain lions in the area, but they are shy animals that generally avoid human contact. This case is quite puzzling. Chris wouldn't have gone far from his gear, and given the extensive search efforts, it's highly unlikely that he fell over or became incapacitated without being found. There's no evidence of crime against hikers being an issue in this part of the Pacific Crest Trail, and the distance from the border makes it improbable that he might have run across drug smugglers. One theory, as posted on an online forum, Find Chris Sylvia Missing Hiker Group, suggests that Chris might have gotten off the trail near Tool Springs and stayed at the Anza RV park for a couple of days. He could have met up with a camp host named Earl, who was known for being friendly towards hikers, and might have given Chris a ride to the Chicula Valley Road to continue his hike. Unfortunately, Earl has since passed away, so this theory remains unconfirmed. Chris's mother, Nancy Sylvia, believes that foul play could be involved in her son's disappearance. All 5 of her children are experienced hikers, and she finds it highly unusual that Chris will go hiking alone and leave his gear behind. Min Kim, Chris's roommate, said all we can really do is hope he's okay and try to remember as many positive moments as we can with him. Despite the years that have passed, Chris's loved ones still search for answers and hope to someday learn the truth behind his disappearance. If you have any information regarding the disappearance of Chris Stevens Sylvia, please contact the San Diego Sheriff's Department at 858-565-5200. Your help could provide much-needed closure for Chris's family and friends, who continue to hold on to hope that they will find out what happened to him. As we reflect on the puzzling nature of Chris's case, it's crucial to remember the importance of staying safe and prepared while embarking on outdoor adventures. Even experienced hikers like Chris can encounter unexpected situations, and it's vital to have a plan in place for communication, supplies, and emergencies. The mysterious disappearance of Chris Sylvia remains an unsolved case, leaving many unanswered questions. Theories have been proposed, but no concrete evidence has emerged to explain what happened to Chris on that fateful hike. His loved ones are left with memories and an unwavering determination to uncover the truth. If you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, like, and share. Your support helps us continue to investigate. In today's story, we'll be discussing the mysterious disappearance of Gail Stewart, a 64-year-old Reno, Nevada woman who went missing on Valentine's Day, February 14th of 2022. Gail Stewart had been missing since 10 a.m. when her son could not get in touch with her and decided to call some friends to help locate the missing woman. One of her son's friends had a feeling that Stewart was in a certain area and decided to ascend a hiking trail in the Coughlin Range outside of Reno. Authorities described this area as a fairly common area for local hikers with numerous dirt roads to walk along. However, Stewart was discovered on the side of a steep slope, an area where hikers typically don't venture. It remains unclear how the 64-year-old ended up on the dangerous cliff, but it's believed she may have fallen down a slope before grabbing onto a tree and clinging to it. In a dramatic twist, a small search party of friends and family members found her roughly 300 to 400 feet from the road. A rescue team, which consisted of about 28 people, arrived at about 9:15 p.m. that evening and spent roughly 30 minutes pulling Stewart to safety. At the time of her rescue, Stewart was unresponsive and suffering from hypothermia. Officials also reported that she was missing a shoe and had sustainable considerable trauma to her legs, although they did not elaborate on the extent of her injuries. Fire Chief Seth Williams of the Reno Fire Department referred to Stewart's rescue as a miracle story, and he shared that the son had called up some friends to help search for her, and one of them decided to head off the cliff, thinking she might have fallen down there. It was then that they found her clinging to a tree. The last thing she said before falling silent was, "Help."
We, for a small department, run roughly 50,000 calls a year, and this one piqued my interest, so I started heading that way. Arrived on scene with a number of family members and people who had been searching for her, and got intel at that point in time she'd been missing for roughly 12 hours. And where she was hiking was a relatively common hiking area, although where she was found was a very unusual area, very steep, something you might consider similar to a double diamond ski run. And that's when we activated our urban search and rescue team. And you can see in the picture we had over 20 firefighters on scene. Paramedics made contact with the patient. She was in pretty bad shape. As the story says, she was clinging to a tree. The bystanders had given her a bunch of blankets, but she'd almost completely stopped shivering, which is a bad sign in terms of hypothermia. So our paramedics on scene, as well as a local ambulance company, started treating her. She had quite a bit of trauma to her lower legs, missing one of her shoes, so she'd been fighting back for a while. The amazing part is, I said, the friend's son, he said he decided just to go look down this hill for no real reason, hollered out and heard her say help. And that was the last word she said. She was completely, effectively catatonic after that. So it's really close. And for firefighters, we go on way too many recoveries. So to have a successful thing where you get to rescue somebody who is in bad shape, get them quickly to the ambulance, get them warmed up. From the time we made contact with the patient to having her in the back of the ambulance was just over a half hour. So it was successful in that terms. And I'm told that she's made a full recovery and is released from the hospital. And for a pretty dangerous situation, in fact, one of our firefighters fell because it was so steep and broke his thumb. So,
However, after a happy ending, this case would only get more mysterious. Stewart again was reporting missing exactly 1 month to the day on March 14th since her previous disappearance. The circumstances of her vanishing were odd, and the timing was eerie. Unlike her first disappearance, Stewart would not be found within hours this time around. Stewart was last seen in the Bypass Bridge parking area near the Hoover Dam, a 470-mile drive from her Reno, Nevada home. It seemed as though she was embarking on a nature walk, with park officials stating that she had gone to the area to take photos. Unfortunately, she disappeared again and never made it back to her vehicle. Tragically, there have been no updates on Stewart's whereabouts following her latest disappearance. Officials reported that she was last seen wearing a black long-sleeve shirt, black leggings, and black shoes. However, she did not have her cell phone or any identification with her at the time. Stewart is described as a 5-foot, 8-inch woman and weighing approximately 125 pounds. With both disappearances having taken place within such a short time frame, the search for Stewart has become a pressing concern for her friends, family, and authorities. They are appealing to the public for any information that could help locate her. In the meantime, the National Park Service Investigative Services Branch has set up a tip line for anyone with information related to Stewart's disappearance. They are asking individuals to contact them at 1-888-653-0009. As the search for Gail Stewart continues, her loved ones remain hopeful that she will be found safe and sound, just as she was during her first disappearance. The fact that she was found alive after her first ordeal is seen as nothing short of a miracle, and they are hoping for another positive outcome with this disappearance also. The story of Gail Stewart's 2 disappearances is a mystery that has captured the attention of both the local community and the wider public. While the search for her continues, it serves as a reminder for everyone to remain vigilant and aware of their surroundings, especially when venturing into remote areas. It also highlights the importance of carrying identification and a cell phone at all times. If you've enjoyed this content from Universe of Mystery, please like, share, and subscribe, and hit that notification bell. It really helps me to bring more mysterious stories to you.
The Great Smoky Mountains National Park, located in the heart of the Appalachian Mountains, holds the distinction of being the most visited national park in the United States. Within this vast expanse of natural beauty lies the picturesque Cades Cove, a popular destination for both locals and tourists alike. Visitors often flock to the area to take in the breathtaking 11-mile loop road, which winds through the lush foliage and offers glimpses of the park's diverse wildlife. Along the way, travelers can also discover historic structures and snap photos of the stunning seasonal scenery, especially in the fall and spring. For those looking to extend their stay, the Cades Cove Campground offers the perfect retreat, complete with numerous hiking and biking trails that allow visitors to truly immerse themselves in the unparalleled beauty of the park. Cades Cove is a popular destination in the Smoky Mountains, attracting visitors who are interested in catching a glimpse of the area's diverse wildlife. Whether you prefer to drive through or camp in the area, Cades Cove offers ample opportunities to observe a variety of creatures. While deer and black bears are commonly sighted, visitors may also encounter coyotes, groundhogs, turkeys, raccoons, and other fascinating species. For many families, including the Martin family from Knoxville, Tennessee, Cades Cove holds a special place in their hearts. For generations, the Martins have made an annual Father's Day weekend pilgrimage to the Smokies, specifically to camp and hike in Cades Cove. Their love for this beautiful area and the many unique experiences it offers continues to draw them back year after year. William Martin, along with his 2 sons, Douglas aged 9, and Dennis aged 6, embarked on a Father's Day weekend adventure on June 13, 1969. Accompanying them on the trip was William's father, Clyde. This was to be Dennis's first such adventure with his father, and the group planned to hike a 13-mile loop trail from Russell to Spence Field in Cades Cove. Both William and Clyde were experienced hikers, having taken this same route multiple times in the past. Douglas, who was only 9 years old, had also hiked the trail before, so he was familiar with the terrain. Although Dennis was only 6 years old, he had been on family hikes before and was able to keep up with the pace of the group. Their journey began in Cades Cove, where they set off on the trail that led them through Abrams Creek and past the junction of the Crib Gap Trail. As they continued on, they eventually arrived at Russell Field, where they were able to take in the breathtaking scenery and enjoy the wilderness. Upon reaching Russell Field on the evening of June 13th, the Martin family met up with Dr. Carter Martin, a family friend from Huntsville, Alabama, along with his 2 sons. It's important to note that despite sharing the same last name, there was no familial relation between the 2 Martin groups. The next morning, on June 14th, the group set out on a 90-minute hike along the Appalachian Trail towards Spence Field. This location was known for its stunning view of Mountain Laurel in full bloom during the month of June. Upon arriving at Spence Field, they were greeted by other members of the family who had also made the trek. After enjoying a late lunch, the Martin children, along with Dr. Martin's children, began to play together. During this time, Dennis's father, William, overheard a conversation between the boys as they huddled up and plotted a little scheme. They discussed the idea of running to the edge of the field, sneaking around, and carrying out a surprise attack to scare the adults. To make the plan more effective, they instructed Dennis to walk alone and stay away from them since he was wearing a bright red t-shirt that might spoil the surprise. William observed the boys joking and laughing together as they schemed their sneak attack. After lunch, 9-year-old Douglas Martin teamed up with Dr. Martin's sons and headed out in one direction, while 6-year-old Dennis headed off in another direction all alone, still wearing his bright red t-shirt. William Martin, Dennis's father, watched for a few minutes as his son walked away before turning his attention back to the rest of the group. A few minutes later, when the children jumped out to scare the grown-ups, no one immediately realized that Dennis wasn't with them. William had assumed that Dennis would catch up with the others and didn't worry too much at first. However, less than 5 minutes had passed before William realized that something was wrong. The family split up and began calling out for Dennis, but there was no answer. William began to feel a growing sense of panic as he and the others searched the area. Despite their efforts, they were unable to locate the little boy. Dennis's father, William Martin, was extremely worried as Dennis was a quiet child who always responded when someone called his name. In an attempt to locate his son, William decided to head in one direction while his father, Clyde, went in the opposite direction. William followed the nearby Appalachian Trail heading west, repeatedly calling out for Dennis as he walked. He covered a 1-mile stretch before turning around and heading back towards Russell Field. He then retraced his steps, hiking all the way back to Spence Field, thinking that Dennis might have gotten confused and followed the same path that they had taken earlier in the day. Despite his efforts, there was still no sign of Dennis. William eventually returned to Spence Field alone, feeling exhausted and defeated. This was 1969, a time when there were no cell phones or quick ways to call for help. Dennis's grandfather, Clyde, realized that they needed assistance and decided to hike to the nearest ranger station at Cades Cove, which was approximately 9 miles away. It took Clyde several hours to reach the ranger station, and by the time he got there, it was already 8:30 p.m. He reported Dennis missing to the rangers, who immediately launched a search and rescue operation. Just as the search for Dennis began, a storm rolled in, further complicating the already challenging task of finding the young boy. The area where Dennis was last seen was known for its complex terrain and potentially dangerous wildlife, and with the added obstacle of heavy rain, the situation became even more daunting. Despite the challenges, a few rangers immediately began searching the immediate area around Spence Field where Dennis had last been seen. They notified dispatch that they planned to search through the night in the hope of finding the missing boy. In 1969, there was no established large-scale search and rescue operation plan in place for the Smoky Mountains National Park. Chief Ranger Sneddon organized a search crew that set up a headquarters camp in Spence Field, where they could plan their efforts to find Dennis. The search crew would begin their search early on the morning of June 15th, hoping to make progress in their quest to find the missing boy. Initially, the search crew for Dennis Martin consisted of 30 men with 5 leaders and 10 additional crews of 2 to 4 men. However, as the search continued, more volunteers arrived on site to join in the effort. By 1 p.m. on June 15, the search party had grown to 240 people, but there was no clear leadership or coordination among them. As the days went by, more and more people joined in the search for Dennis, including Boy Scouts and rescue squads from the North Carolina side of the Smokies who brought in jeeps, trucks, and helicopters to aid in the search efforts. Eventually, more than 1,400 people would take part in the search. However, the large number of search teams and volunteers may have actually hindered the search. There was no established search and rescue operation plan for the park at the time, and the search lacked a clear chain of command. As a result, searchers were likely destroying evidence or any clues that could lead them to Dennis Martin. Despite the growing number of people involved in the search, Dennis remained missing. As the search for Dennis Martin continued, many different ideas and theories were put forward about what could have happened to him. Some of these came from psychics and fortune tellers who had contacted the authorities offering to help. One psychic from Los Angeles claimed to have seen the boy 2.5 miles to the left of where he had last been seen by his father or brother. According to this psychic, Dennis had fallen off a steep area and was now stuck in the bushes, but still alive. Another psychic from New Orleans suggested that the search should stop looking on the ground and start looking up in the trees and treetops to find Dennis. These were just a couple of examples of dozens of calls that the search team received from psychics who claimed they had information that could lead to Dennis. Despite the search leaders following up on every call, they all turned out to be dead ends. After a week of unsuccessful searching, the FBI was called in to investigate whether there was any indication of foul play or a potential kidnapping. The FBI will get involved in a missing persons case if there is a suspicion of a crime. FBI agent Jim Ride was assigned to look into the background of the Martin family to see if anyone could have had a motive to harm or abduct young Dennis. After thorough investigation, the FBI found no evidence of any enemies or suspicious individuals connected to the Martins. The lack of any solid leads prompted the FBI and the Martins to refocus their search efforts back in the Smoky Mountains. The Martin family cooperated with the authorities and tried to recall every detail they could remember from the time they arrived at the Great Smoky Mountains National Park until the last moment when William saw Dennis walking away from the group. They recounted everything that had happened during the initial search for Dennis, in the hours before Clyde Martin reached the ranger station. Dennis went missing around 4 p.m. and it took Clyde until 8:30 p.m. to get to the ranger station, which gave them a 4.5-hour window. The family searched the immediate area and enlisted the help of anyone around Spence Field who offered to assist in finding Dennis. The family went through each detail again with the FBI when they arrived to investigate whether Dennis's disappearance was a kidnapping. The FBI interviewed friends, family, and acquaintances but didn't find any enemies or people connected to the family who seemed suspicious enough to investigate further. So, they went back to the Smokies to continue the search for Dennis. The Martins raised some red flags and alerted authorities to investigate potential leads. One such lead was an unnamed man from Dandridge, Tennessee, who had been camping at Spence Field around the time of Dennis's disappearance. William Martin, Dennis's father, reported to park rangers that this man, referred to as Mr. Cooper, seemed to stick close to William during most of the search efforts. Adding to the mysterious circumstances was the emergence of an unknown woman who claimed to possess extrasensory perception. She reached out to the police department and requested to speak with Dennis's mother. After speaking with the woman, Mrs. Martin was instructed to be wary of Mr. Cooper from Dandridge. Concerned that the woman and Mr. Cooper may be working together to abduct Dennis, Mrs. Martin brought up the possibility to the police. Despite the potential lead, there is no public record indicating that authorities found the situation suspicious enough to launch a further investigation. Nevertheless, the Martins noted these strange occurrences and felt that they warranted attention. As the search for their missing son, Dennis, continued, the Martins grew increasingly desperate for any explanation that could offer hope for his safe return. They considered every possible scenario that could have led to Dennis's disappearance, including the idea that someone may have confused their family with another, but there is no publicly available evidence to suggest that this theory held any weight. Contained within the files that are public and related to the investigation into Dennis's disappearance are several intriguing leads and witness statements, among which is the account of a man named Harold Key. From Carthage, Tennessee, Harold and his family were present in the park on the day Dennis went missing. Specifically, they were in the C Branch area, located roughly 7 miles from Spence Field and near Rowan's Creek. According to Key, he heard a disturbing scream that afternoon, which prompted him and his wife to scan their surroundings, fearing that one of their children may be under attack by a bear. Shortly thereafter, Key spotted a suspicious-looking man moving swiftly through the nearby woods. Key recalls that the man appeared to be intentionally avoiding them, and he described the man as rough in appearance. Several days after Harold Key and his family were in the park, they returned home and learned of Dennis Martin's disappearance through news reports. Key immediately reported his account of the sickening scream and the rough-looking man he saw to park officials. However, after investigating the matter, park officials determined that Rowan's Creek was too far from Spence Field for the incidents to be related. Unfortunately, the available information on the investigation into Dennis's disappearance ends there. Although the FBI continued to collaborate with park officials throughout the search, the contents of their report remain a mystery. This lack of transparency has frustrated many who have attempted to obtain the official report through Freedom of Information requests. The search for Dennis continued for 7 agonizing days, and on June 20th, which was also Dennis's 7th birthday, park ranger records show plans were made for how to proceed if he was not found alive. The following day, with over 1,400 volunteers participating in the search, concerns arose that uncoordinated efforts could be doing more harm than good. As a result, park officials requested that volunteers stop joining the search, which had by that point covered over 56 square miles. As the search for Dennis Martin stretched on, the costs continued to pile up. Despite the massive effort from volunteers and law enforcement, the hope of finding Dennis alive began to dwindle. On Wednesday, June 25th, park officials announced that the search for Dennis would be coming to an end soon. For the Martin family, the news was devastating. After almost 2 weeks of camping out and searching tirelessly for their son, they had to pack up and head back to Knoxville with heavy hearts. The uncertainty surrounding Dennis's disappearance and the lack of answers only added to their anguish. As the search for Dennis Martin dragged on without any solid leads, the National Park Rangers made the difficult decision to suspend all major search operations on Sunday, June 29th. Despite their best efforts, they had come up empty-handed and the FBI had found no evidence to support theories of Dennis being kidnapped. In the weeks that followed, the Martin family continued to hold out hope for any information that could lead to their son's safe return. They raised a reward of $5,000, equivalent to about $40,000 today, for anyone who could provide credible information about Dennis's whereabouts. However, as time passed and the search efforts turned up nothing new, the park officials had to make the tough call to officially close the search for Dennis Martin on September 11, 1969. The Martin family was left with no answers and the haunting memory of their son's disappearance in the Great Smoky Mountains. The disappearance of Dennis Martin has remained a mystery for over half a century, with no definitive answers as to what happened to the young boy. Various theories have been put forward, including the possibility that he became lost in the rugged terrain and perished due to the elements or being attacked by wildlife. Over the years, there have been several tips and leads that have emerged. One notable tip came in 1985 when a group of illegal ginseng hunters stumbled upon what appeared to be the remains of a small boy in an area about 3 miles from Spence Field, where Dennis was last seen alive. The hunters found a skull and other remains, but fearing arrest, almost 2 decades passed before one of the men called in the tip. When a search team finally looked for the remains, they came up empty-handed, as too much time had passed. According to a report by park officials, the search for Dennis was a marked failure. Despite the presence of many people on the scene, any possible evidence that could have been preserved was likely trampled upon by the numerous individuals who came to offer their assistance. The failure to properly coordinate and organize the search for Dennis Martin prompted the National Park Service to completely overhaul their search and rescue operations across all national parks. As a result of these changes, agencies all over the United States and the world have also adopted these new protocols, which have ultimately resulted in saving lives. Despite the positive outcomes of these changes, it is heart-wrenching to know that they came too late to rescue Dennis Martin. His disappearance remains an unsolved mystery, and his tragic case has served as a catalyst for reforming search and rescue procedures across the country.
Nestled amongst the remote Chiricahua Mountains, lies a vast and rugged expanse of land known as the Chiricahua National Monument. This area is characterized by steep gullies, canyons, jagged rocks, and massive boulders balancing atop each other, creating a landscape that resembles the moonscape of some alien world. Despite its otherworldly appearance, the Chiricahua National Monument is part of a national park system, holds a place on the National Register of Historic Places and is renowned for its natural beauty and unique rock formations. Visitors to this area can experience the wild and often lethal beauty of this land by hiking its scenic trails. However, the Chiricahua National Monument is also known for one of the most puzzling unsolved national park disappearances on record. The disappearance in question involves Paul Fugate, who at the time was a 41-year-old law enforcement ranger working for the National Park Service and stationed at the Chiricahua National Monument. Fugate was known for his enthusiasm as a ranger, his love for adventure, and his experience as a hiker. He was also highly knowledgeable of the region's terrain and geology. On January 13, 1980, a Sunday afternoon, Fugate told a seasonal staff member working with him at the Park Visitor Center that he was going to check the trail leading to a new 400-acre parcel of land acquired by the park called Fairway Ranch. After telling the staff member to close down without him if he wasn't back by 4:30 p.m., Paul Fugate, a seasoned park ranger, set out on the well-marked trail to the Fairway Ranch in his full ranger uniform and badge. It was supposed to be a quick hike, and Fugate didn't even bother to take his radio with him. He waved goodbye and casually walked out of sight. He then seemingly disappeared off the face of the earth. This would be the last confirmed time anyone would see him. When Fugate failed to return on time, a search was launched that involved tracking dogs, aircraft, and hundreds of law enforcement personnel from various agencies, including the National Park Service, the local Sheriff's Department, the Bureau of Land Management, the U.S. Forest Service, and the Southern Arizona Search and Rescue Association. Family members and volunteers also joined in on the search, starting with the trail to Fairway Ranch, where no trace of Fugate could be found, despite the search expanding to cover 17 square miles of rough and rugged terrain. Law enforcement authorities became increasingly desperate to locate Fugate and posted a $5,000 reward, which quickly ballooned to $20,000. However, none of this produced any leads. The only clue that seemed promising was from a witness who, under hypnosis, claimed to have seen Fugate unconscious in a truck between two unidentified men. There was absolutely no corroborating evidence to support this, and the witness himself admitted he could have been mistaken. The vehicle was traveling very fast, and ultimately, this lead led nowhere. Although it was widely assumed that Fugate had met with foul play, there was no concrete evidence to support this theory also. As the search for Fugate continued, various theories circulated about his disappearance. The most popular theory suggested that Fugate had stumbled upon drug dealers in the area and was either kidnapped or murdered. But once again, there was no evidence to support this. Another theory suggested that Fugate may have been attacked by a wild animal or had suffered an injury from falling, but considering his experience as a ranger, it was considered unlikely. Another possible theory was that Fugate intentionally disappeared. One clue that supported this theory was his instruction to the visitor center staff to close the center if he had not returned by 4:30 p.m., suggesting that he knew he might not be back. However, Fugate's family has challenged the theory that he abandoned his post, as he had left all his money and belongings at his home, as well as an expensive car he had been restoring and his beloved camera equipment.
Paul and Dodie's longtime friend Barbara Elfbrand admits the mystery is often on her mind.
I don't have the belief that I did originally that it would be solved. All the good clues or breakthroughs have led to walls which they couldn't get through. I know that Paul didn't just leave on his own, and I would like to know what happened to him, and it would be closure, it would be peace.
Fugate's disappearance is still one of the most puzzling unsolved national parks vanishings on record. In 1986, the National Park Service officially declared Fugate deceased, despite having no conclusive evidence of his death. There have been criticisms of the authorities' handling of the case, including accusations that they did not take appropriate measures, such as extending the search area beyond the parkland and that the FBI did not take the case seriously enough and tried to dismiss it. Despite the lack of evidence, rumors and theories about Fugate's disappearance have continued to circulate. Some have speculated that he stumbled upon drug dealers in the area and was killed or kidnapped, while others have suggested that he may have been attacked by a wild animal or intentionally disappeared. While there is no concrete evidence to support any of these theories, the mystery surrounding Fugate's disappearance has yet to be fully resolved. In June of 2018, the National Park Service made a surprising move by reopening the decades-old case of Paul Fugate's disappearance. This announcement was made suddenly and without explanation, but it came with a substantial increase in the reward for information, which now stands at $60,000. The National Park Service cited the discovery of new evidence as the reason for this decision, although no specifics were given. The sudden reopening of the case has raised questions and speculation about what this new evidence could be and whether it is significant enough to bring the case to a close. When the National Park Service was asked about the new evidence, they replied with, quote, "We have no new information and respectfully decline to interview at this time." The fact that Fugate's case was reopened after so many years is unusual, and it suggests that authorities have reason to believe that they may finally be able to solve this mystery. However, whether this means that they are close to finding Fugate or discovering what happened to him remains to be seen. The circumstances surrounding his disappearance are murky and riddled with theories, rumors, and speculation. The lack of evidence or leads has made it challenging for investigators to determine what really happened to Fugate. What makes this case particularly strange is that most National Park Service rangers who have gone missing have been found, or at least some trace of them have been discovered. However, in Fugate's case, there is no concrete evidence to indicate what might have happened to him. Despite the renewed interest in the effort to solve this case, it seems that the disappearance of Paul Fugate remained a baffling mystery.
Paddy, also known as Patricia Krieger, was a 65-year-old woman who went hiking with her boyfriend, Larry Presley, her dog, and 5 other individuals who were friends and family of Larry's. They were in the Sauk Mountain area of Washington state on October 2, 2010, to scatter Larry's parents' ashes at the top of the trail. While hiking back down, Paddy became separated from the group and started walking down the wrong trail. Although the group called out to her, she did not respond and continued walking. The group did not follow her, assuming they would meet back up at the bottom of the trail. When the group reached the end of the hike, they realized that Paddy had not yet arrived. They waited for an unknown period of time before deciding to head off. Some of the hikers went to a nearby gas station, while others went shopping. The group estimated that Paddy was left alone for around 4 hours. When they returned to the park and realized that Paddy had still not shown up, they immediately notified the authorities. Unfortunately, despite extensive search efforts by the authorities and volunteers, Paddy was never found. Her disappearance remains a mystery. The group Paddy was hiking with claimed to be her family, which initially left her actual family unaware of her disappearance. It wasn't until a week later when her employer contacted her son because she hadn't shown up for work that they learned Paddy was missing. Her dog, Bear, was found 3 weeks later, several miles from where she was last seen. Although malnourished, the dog was alive, indicating that it had been on the mountain since Paddy had gone missing. Despite being physically fit, Paddy was not an experienced hiker and was not dressed appropriately for the cold weather. When she was reported missing, law enforcement brought in scent dogs to track her movements. The dogs led investigators down the trail to the parking lot, suggesting that something might have happened to her once she had returned there. However, after finding Bear, the investigators re-evaluated this theory. According to Paddy's friends and family, Larry Presley was found with her keys and driver's license after she vanished. One of his friends was also in possession of her mobile phone. Additionally, when Paddy's family went to her house, they found a suitcase filled with jewelry in the back of a truck. When they finally entered the home, which required obtaining a court order because Larry was still living there with his friends, they discovered that it had been completely ransacked and trashed. Paddy's safe had been rifled through, and there was garbage all over the floor. Her safety deposit box had also been emptied. In addition to the other suspicious circumstances surrounding Paddy's disappearance, Larry and his friends were reportedly seen driving her vehicles after she went missing. The circumstances surrounding how Larry and Paddy met were also strange. Larry had a lengthy criminal record, and upon his release from prison, he appeared at Paddy's doorstep claiming to be a friend of her late husband, Jason Graham. Larry told Paddy that Jason had asked him to take care of her if anything happened to him. Jason was a real estate agent, and it's unclear how he and Larry could have become acquainted. Paddy's family believes that Larry may have read Jason's obituary in the newspaper and targeted Paddy for personal gain. At the time Larry and Paddy met, she was doing quite well for herself, owning her own home and several vehicles. Shortly after Larry moved in with her, several of his friends also moved in. Paddy's friends and family reported that their relationship was rocky, and several red flags appeared throughout their time together. For example, she once found drugs hidden behind a fake wall in her shed. She also discovered a gun in the saddlebag of Larry's motorcycle and found out that he was having affairs with other women. According to Paddy's family, they believed she was too afraid to enter a relationship with Larry, who reportedly refused to help search for his missing partner after she vanished. Despite a search effort that included the use of thermal cameras and a helicopter, no sign of Paddy was ever found. Her family suspects Larry may have played a role in her disappearance. In 2013, Larry was arrested and charged with federal weapons violations, and he received a 10-year prison sentence. However, he was released in 2018. Despite this, there has been no significant progress in the investigation into Paddy's disappearance, which remains unsolved. The last sighting of Paddy was in the Sauk Mountain area of Washington state on October 2, 2010, wearing a long-sleeve white top under a blue short-sleeve top, a black sweatshirt, and blue jeans. The disappearance of Paddy Haskell in 2010 remains a mystery to this day, despite extensive search efforts and ongoing investigation. Her family suspects foul play, particularly involving her boyfriend at the time, Larry Presley, who had a criminal history and a suspicious relationship with Paddy. Despite his refusal to help search for Paddy and numerous red flags in their relationship, Larry was not charged in connection to her disappearance. Instead, he was later arrested on unrelated federal weapons charges and served time behind bars. Paddy's family continues to hold out hope for answers, and her case serves as a reminder of the importance of staying vigilant and cautious in relationships, particularly with those who may have questionable pasts.